Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched, where this week I watched Snakes on a Plane from 2006. Man, what a throwback this is, and mainly the reason I ended up watching it in the first place is this movie, at the time that it released, was such a meme. And I mean, these are the early days, by all accounts, of internet memedom, memehood, whatever you want to call it, that this is, to my memory, one of the first movies that had a really substantial and, to me, memorable presence on the internet and relied on a lot of internet circulation for its publicity. I don't know if that was always the plan or if that happened organically and then they leaned into it more, but everybody knows the line from this movie, no matter if they've seen it or not. And by all accounts, I think most people have not seen this movie. So I figured it was probably only right that I go and take a look at it myself after having it sort of in, the back of my head all this time. Everybody knows the line. I should learn what the movie actually is. And unfortunately, I just have to go up front and say that this movie is not good, and not in the ways you would hope it's not good. Nobody goes into a movie called Snakes on a Plane hoping for a great piece of cinema. Not even probably a particularly good one. But this movie commits what I have before on many other occasions mentioned as the cardinal sin of being a mediocre movie, which is it's boring. It's just boring. It's not very good at what it does, and it squanders any opportunity at being unique because it's just not good enough and it's not bad enough to be interesting. It's very dull, pretty much from beginning to end. There are a few points, within it that are entertaining. It's not that there's no value or no redeeming qualities to the film, but you can look at this film and say, wow, this is a great opportunity to be very silly or, very ridiculous and over the top. And it doesn't do that. And that's what shocked me the most watching this. I definitely expected cheese-tastic, over-the-top kind of thing. And I think this is really interesting in the context of the time that it comes out and the sort of things that came before it and came after it. This movie is, I wouldn't say heavily reliant on CG, but it uses a substantial amount of it. And it's not even done particularly poorly. I would say, on the whole, the CGI snakes, when they are present, look pretty good. They're not always great, and I wouldn't say they've aged super well, but they didn't cheap out on the animations. They look serviceable. And in a way, that is a mistake. They should have looked worse. What's weird, though, is thinking about the context in which they exist in retrospect, which is that the horror movie genre was going through sort of a sea change in the 2000s, where by the 2010s, the business model that was largely pioneered by groups like The Asylum and some other bigger productions that would adopt the same sort of mentality is that horror can be made like it was back in the the 70s on the cheap, and you can wait for you can make a bunch of things for not a lot of money and wait for the one that clicks. So it's hard not to compare something like this immediately to something that would come later, like, I don't know, Sharknado, or something else that relies on just being completely over the top and overtly not trying to be particularly good to appreciate a certain quality in it. This movie makes the mistake of trying to be a pretty good movie, and it becomes very dull as a result. surely if you get the plot summary, which I don't think this is going to be a spoiler, if you get the plot explanation that there are hundreds of or thousands of snakes, venomous snakes on a plane, that you expect that to be completely ridiculous, right? I don't think I was unreasonable to have that assumption. But they try to explain the reasons why this happens in very grounded ways. They try to explain why the snakes are there in the first place. They try to explain why the snakes behave kind of crazy. They try to explain a whole bunch of other things, but they do it very poorly, and they shoot themselves in the foot as a result, because rather than saying, oh no, there are crazy super snakes that climbed into this plane of their own accord and decided to go all slasher film on everyone, and we don't have to have any explanation beyond that, they tried to explain everything. And so you start applying logic to a film plot that should not have logic applied to it. Now, I keep referring to this as a horror film, but it's also not really a horror film. In many ways, this is much closer to a crime thriller or something like that. I'm not going to spoil it, not because there's a substantial amount to spoil. Like I could explain the entire plot in a matter of moments here, but just because it doesn't really even matter for this film, because everything about that is very, very boring and is entirely there as an excuse for an unnecessary excuse, as previously mentioned, for why the whole thing comes together the way that it does. And if you just wanted to see a crazy, kind of over-the-top crime thriller with, some monster elements, there's a bunch of other things that you could watch. For some reason, the thing that came to mind when I was thinking about what would I rather be watching instead of Snakes on a Plane, my thought was Swordfish. And I don't think I made a video on Swordfish. I think that preceded this series. Swordfish sucks. Swordfish is a bad movie, but it seems to revel in its horribleness and does everything that this movie does better, at least to my memory. It's been a few years, while still being undeniably not a great film. So leaning into, a criminal aspect with a slightly over-the-top premise that under-delivers on that premise, Snakes on a Plane under-delivers worse, because it doesn't deliver a lot of satisfying snakes on a satisfying plane. It delivers a lot of somewhat dull and random snakes on a silly plane. I'm going to continue considering this and talking about it as a horror film, because I think that's ultimately what it is closest to, if only incidentally. A substantial amount of the runtime of the film is dedicated to people being attacked by the snakes. And I don't think that should be that much of a surprise. Except this is where it becomes blatantly obvious how badly they've screwed this up. Because they don't do interesting things with the snakes. And there are substantial long scenes that are just fast cuts between shots of snakes killing people. And it doesn't take that long to start quite literally checking your watch, wondering how much longer this scene is going to go along. The movie itself even seems to know that it's getting dull, because it's not even that it runs out of ideas for snake kills, but it starts having people die or be injured in other ways that are indirectly related to the snakes, like falling on stuff or stuff collapsing or whatever else. Because apparently they couldn't think of more snake kills. I can think of more snake kills than the ones they did. And that's not even to get to the we won't even get into the complete lack of any scientific validity to anything, or the way everybody who gets killed by pretty much everybody gets killed by a snake is killed at the exact pace that the movie needs, which means they either survive way too long or completely have symptoms only when it is plot relevant, or if they are just there for slasher bait, for the horror aspect, they die immediately, and the snakes attack them in ways that don't make any sense for snakes at all. Why is there a snake climbing out of a guy's mouth? That doesn't make sense. Why would it do that? Anyway, they're more like little aliens in all their behavior, and yet, like I said, they try and ground this in a sense of reality. They could have made the snakes literally aliens, and it would have made it more compelling. In fact, let's rewrite it right now. It is, in fact, somebody on the plane got some aliens angry, so the aliens flew their ship over the plane and teleported some little mini angry serpent aliens into the plane. Now they're attacking people. Great. This is way more interesting now because you can do whatever you want with them. You can make the snakes as absurd as possible. You can cut out entire plot arcs that are detracting from the pace of the film. The pace is all over the place. That for characters we don't care about who are trying to deal with the idea that there are snakes on the plane and how to deal with them. That doesn't matter. That's not what we're here for. People watched snakes on a plane to watch people get attacked by snakes on a plane and everything that comes with that. But to get into the plot and the character, well, the plot's very thin. I'll take it back. The pacing is not awful. It is actually surprisingly moderate in taking moments to backpedal a little bit and have some breathing room. If you think too hard about it, you go, okay, but why did the snakes just not decide to attack right now? And then if you think about that for half a second, you realize it's only for plot reasons. But we won't even get into that. The pacing's okay, it's acceptable. The real flaw is with the remainder of the characterization. Because as I've talked about before, when it comes to movies in general and horror movies in particular, and especially if you're going to lean heavily on horror movie tropes, which are very strongly established and have been for many, many years and have a long history of being, of their adaptations over the years and the influences that horror movies take from each other, you need distinct characters with character archetypes. They don't need to be deep characters. In fact, for most horror movie purposes, they probably shouldn't be very deep. And the movie definitely leans into a lot of the basic tropes of this is the responsible one. This is the one who's, being trying to be seductive, and this is the one that's like the grizzled whatever, and this is the panicky one. And that all should go somewhere, or at least set up potential scenes for those characters to show their tropes in a way that makes it satisfying to watch them either survive or not survive. But it doesn't capitalize on that at all, really ever. So that doesn't even... There are also too many characters. I know it's on a plane. The plane's already only half full. They could have just had even less characters and it would have been gone better as a result. They could have used a smaller plane as well, which... I'm trying to rewrite a movie that doesn't need to be rewritten. It's already... It's not fixable. But what's weird is there's some decent performances in the movie. Now, of course, everything, take that with a grain of salt, because these are performances by decent actors with a bad script in an even worse movie. But that doesn't mean that they can't have decent performances. Most of them are just acceptable. They're fine. Mostly, I would say the best performances come in the sort of slightly over-the-top acting that happens in certain scenes. But there's some notable actors in here as well. Sam Jackson, of course, is front and center, being basically the poster boy for the movie, even though he's not technically the main character. It's weird to have to define that. There's Kenan Thompson, who I didn't remember being in the film. I don't know if that's just because I didn't really know Kenan Thompson as well as an actor at the time. When did Kenan and Kel stop airing? I don't know. This was like an in-between place where he was sort of young in his adult acting career, I think. So I just didn't know at the time. He puts on a pretty good performance under the circumstances in here. He is obviously playing a comic relief character of sorts, but it's not completely played for laughs. This is not a particularly funny movie. It should be sillier. But that's another sidebar. And then I think of note, I'm actually just fascinated by the presence of Juliana Margulies in this film, because I think this was also not early in her career, but sort of before she became a more notable actor. It's funny actually, because her character in this film is on her last flight as a steward on the plane, or a flight attendant, and going off to law school, which is very funny to me, as just a few years after this, she would, probably have one of the biggest acting roles of her career for several years after, which was that of playing a lawyer in The Good Wife, among some others that she'd have after that. So she's played several lawyers, I think. That one's just kind of a fun, completely incidental, not intentional Easter egg thing there. But it would make me laugh very hard if somebody tried to, tie the the narratives of Snakes on a Plane and The Good Wife together. That's neither here nor there. That one just tickles me. So, yeah, this is a movie that vastly under-delivers on a very silly premise. It should be cheesy. Everybody should be very over the top. The slasher elements, if you're leaning into those, which the movie is, should be more satisfying. They should be more interesting. They should not be boring, and they should be used sparingly as well. If you wanna be in the confined space of a plane, then give more opportunities, more plot beats, whatever, to sort of have the push back and forth between the protagonist group and the opponent, the horror slasher, or whatever you want to consider it within the structure of the film. But it just kind of doesn't do that, and just throws scenes in as needed. And in addition to notably kind of squandering a huge amount of buzz and fan interaction before it ever released, apparently as part of the production, as I was reading up right before this, they changed it from being a PG-13 movie to an R movie, which is very interesting to me, because if they had kept this PG-13, I think they would have saved themselves some pain, and probably it would have performed better at the box office. As R movies go, this is pretty boring. It warrants an R rating, but not by much. It basically comes down to, how do you turn this back into a PG-13 movie? You remove a few profanities out of Sam Jackson's dialogue. You remove some of the more gruesome aspects of the snake kills, a few of the snake kills, which wouldn't be that hard to do. You just do them off screen, or with a little less blood, or a little less. They're boring to begin with. They're just at best, they're a little bit gross. And then I think you'd have to remove the one case of topless woman in one of the scenes, which is only there once. It's if you're gonna cross the line of being the type of horror movie, the type of slasher movie, to dip into the sort of the horror tropes of that ilk, of having, having a very male gaze type of thing, and having a lot of sexy women who are having horrible things happen to them, then you might as well, if you're going to do in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, why do one? You just earned yourself an R rating for very little. It's not very engaging. It's not really my cup of tea in the first place, but it's also just not done well. So just take those things out, and this probably would have appealed to a lot more teenage boys who would have gone or been allowed to go because it was rated PG-13 instead. There's just not a lot of reason to make this R, unless you want to swing the other way, which is the better option, which is to make this better by making it way more over the top and absurd and cheesy, and making it very much, a goofy thing for adults, which is what I had been hoping for today, honestly. Not what I got. As one final note, the most shocking thing in this film was the after credits. I sat slack-jawed as the credits rolled, because very quickly as the credits rolled, a song started playing. And I'm listening to it going, okay, what's this weird pop punk song doing in the middle of the credits of a 2006 movie? This was not normal for the time. There was not really any other like pop punk music in the film. There was really very little music of note in the film at all. And I was just so curious because it caught my ear, especially because it's a particular musical aesthetic that's kind of dead in the current day and age. But it wasn't just that the music was playing, it was playing a whole music video. And 2006 was going to be a weird time. I don't know why I'm explaining this to people, because you were either there and you won't need this explanation, or you weren't there, and no matter how much I explain it, explaining the culture of 2006 is not going to make sense. But I'm going to go for it anyway. MTV and VH1 were not really music video television anymore. The era of internet video was just kind of starting up. YouTube didn't exist yet, but music videos were in a weird in-between place. The music industry in general was also in a weird place, and so was pop punk. And so what I discovered as I'm watching this is like, okay, I don't recognize these musicians. They sound kind of familiar, but I can't possibly place them. Oh, wait a minute. That's the lead singer from Fall Out Boy, and there's the lead singer from Gym Class Heroes. Why are they there? And so I ended up doing a little bit of a deep dive and finding out that the song is called Snakes on a Plane, Bring It. The band is named Cobra Starship, which shockingly is not a band that was made just for this song or just for this film. It just is entirely incidental that they existed, that they came to existence a little bit before this movie existed. And yes, apparently Cobra Starship, the lead singer, or the Cobra Starship are friends with Pete Wentz and also with Travie McCoy. And so Travie is singing on it and Pete's just in the background somewhere. But it was just such a shocking thing to see for them to run a music video at the end of a movie at all is weird. For it to be this random pop punk sound with some notable names in it is another. And then for it to be a song about the lead song for Snakes that's called Snakes on a Plane, I don't know. So the music video is still out there. So after you finish this video, go look up the name of you can go watch this music video and be as stunned as I am. Again, it's called Bring It, or Snakes on a Plane, by Cobra Starship. And as far as I can tell, the music video on YouTube is the same one that runs just verbatim at the end of the film in a small window as the credits are next to it. It's so weird. Footnote on a footnote, I then looked up the soundtrack because movie soundtracks in the 2000s were also very weird. This seems to be less of a thing now, but it was very much a thing in the 2000s where the soundtrack to a movie, a lot of movies, just had a lot of music on it that was sort of thematic, but was not in the movie at all. And so the lineup on the soundtrack to this movie is insane. Because it's got, let's see, it's got Cobra Starship, Panic at the Disco, CeeLo Green, All American Rejects, Fall Out Boy, Gym Class Heroes, and of all things, Coheed and Cambria. I don't know what to make of this soundtrack because I'm just staring at it right now. It's unbelievable. I kind of want to get the whole lineup of this playlist and listen to it end to end and see if I go insane. Anyway, I think that's a good note to leave off on. This movie is disappointing. It's not even bad in an entertaining way for the most part, unfortunately. But if you wanted to sit around and get drunk with some friends and make fun of it, it could work for that. I could see that. Beyond that, not really. It's mostly kind of dull. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'll see you guys next time.